Understand it is more likely than not that Scott Morrison will travel to the G20 in Rome and COP26 in Glasgow at the end of the month, but a lot will depend on whether New South Wales has in place a 7-day home quarantine regime then, or at least a 7-day trial he can join rather than the onerous 14-day quarantine requirement that presently exists. Plus, developments here will factor into his decision to travel. How is the country going in terms of opening up and the states coming together on the national plan? The PM is expected to announce an Australian climate target in the next couple of weeks, even before that COP26 summit, one that could commit to net zero emissions by 2050 and even a medium-term target before then. One can only speculate that that would be for 2035 or 2030, perhaps a 35% reduction from 2005 levels, up from 26 to 28. There is talk the US want a stronger 2030 target. They gave us the AUKUS nuclear submarines deal. Perhaps Scott Morrison can give them a climate deal in exchange. In Liberal polling, I'm told, after COVID, climate consistently comes up as the number 2 issue of concern for voters at the moment. There is a belief in government that the PM can do a deal with Barnaby Joyce and his party room, even as the likes of Matt Canavan, and you can see that here again today, and Lou O'Brien sound off with their opposition against net zero. Both men are Joyce supporters, mind you. So the PM will have something to deliver to Glasgow. Then it becomes about whether the PM will go to Glasgow. The PM is again in a 14-day quarantine situation, as we report now, after his visit to the US. He's third in 3 or so months after the G7 Plus meeting in June had to quarantine and after he had to travel from Sydney to Canberra. So Gladys Berejiklian and her quarantine arrangements in New South Wales hold a large key towards whether this travel happens or not. When National Cabinet is on tomorrow, there will be yet more discussion about when the country opens up to overseas and how. It would be preferable for the whole of the country to open up at 80% vaccination in November, with a home quarantine system to replace hotel quarantine then. But most believe New South Wales will go first on this, with federal support, perhaps coincidentally enabling the PM to travel a bit more easily. And when that international travel opening does happen, the concept of red or amber or green zone countries will go, as I understand it. It will be if people are vaccinated, what vaccine did they take, and that they test before departure and home quarantine for 7 days. It will be about the individual, not about the country from which they came. So as Kieran mentioned, New South Wales yesterday talked about halving their emissions from 2005 levels by 2030. Dominic Perrottet had more to say on that in an interview we'll play later in the program.
Josh clearly identifies this as an important issue moving forward, because he'd be speaking to the same people, that we do every day, and that when you're trying to get access to finance, we know from a lot of those institutions globally that they're looking at those countries who have strong records in this space. And that's not just happening at a governmental level, it's happening at a private sector level as well. So, governments are notoriously slow in following the private sector lead. So I think this is a great opportunity for our state here in New South Wales and for our country to lead the way in this space.